Well, welcome back to OG's Garage. Today I'm not going to be working on a car, but I am going to be working on my broken washing machine. Well, there's a lot of videos online that'll tell you how to remove the motor and the pump and probably do it a lot better than I can. What I'm going to be talking to you about today is my personal experience with this particular washing machine. It's a Kenmore 90 series. It's an older model, and my friends were telling me that I have to get a new motor for it, and so before I did, paid $150 or more for a new motor. I wanted to check it out because uh, basically the motor runs. It just doesn't do a few things that should be happening with this particular machine. So came up with a couple of things that I think will be of interest to you if you're having trouble with your machine. So why don't you let me show you what I did and the outcome on this. This spin switch, you know, when your cover comes down, you have a little plunger there that fits into this little slot here. Most washers have that. That's a safety precaution. They want you to have that lid closed before this thing starts spinning and drags you into the abyss, you know. So check this little plate here. You should have a little plate there or something when you push on it, and sometimes that switch breaks apart, and it's kind of easy to check. As you could take these, there's two bolts, screws on this particular machine, and if you loosen those, you can pull out that little switch and check it. If it's busted, you're going to have to replace it. Sometimes you can test them out. If you got to be careful though. If you have it plugged in, you don't want to be monkeying around with this thing when it's plugged in. So make sure that your electricity is off when you're monkeying around with anything electrical. Okay. So once you determine that switch is okay and that's not the problem, then your problem might have to go down to the motor and the pump and check that wiring out and stuff. So let's go ahead and do that. The first thing I want to do is, because I'm replacing, if you're going to do this and you have these old rubber hoses, you might, especially if they're a little old, they get brittle, and you don't want to be on vacation and have these snap on you, because these hoses are always under water pressure unless you shut them off at the source. They're always going to be under pressure, and you don't want to be on a 2-week vacation and have these things bust on you, especially if they're old. So things to think about. What I'm doing is replacing these old ones with the reinforced hoses. So a pair of pliers or something to remove these hoses. Once in a while, especially if you're having slow water feeds when you turn on your machine, at the edge, I don't know if you can see this, but at the edge, at the end of these hoses, before they enter your machine, you have a little screen filter. Sometimes if you have real hard water or rusty pipes or a feed, these will get clogged up. So if they clog up on you, check these out. You might have to replace the screen or just clean them if there's just rust or particle buildup on there. Okay, so that's another reason for slow feed, water feed. So after pulling the motor out, I wanted to inspect it further. I didn't want to go out and buy a new motor for you know, 150, 200 bucks or whatever. So what I did was I'm going to kind of check this thing out. A lot of times the problem is not in the motor, especially if the motor is pumping and it's washing and it's agitating and doing everything else. You might want to check this box. Sometimes, because this box contains some little contacts that are that could be busted, or sometimes just need a little work. So what I did is I removed this box. I'm just showing you, it's a single screw Phillips, and you won't be able to remove this box because it's wired. You can remove it if you want to take out all the contacts in the back, and just make sure you know where they're at. This little fiber cover slides off, and I'll show you how that goes. It just slides out, and you'll be able to figure it out once you start, and it comes off, and you'll be able to see the contacts. Let me close in on here a little bit and see if you can see the little contacts in here. And what I noticed on the back of this cover, if I turn it over, there's a burn mark right here. That burn mark tells me that whatever's underneath there, that contact, is something's happening with it. In this particular case, it's this one right here. And I'll see if I can close in on this a little bit. A little blurry in here. Let's see if we can bring that in there a little bit. And you'll see that this contact is kind of smoked out a little bit. Now, what had happened is the side of this broke off, and that's what's holding that contact. You'll see it when you'll see what I mean if this is the same problem with you. So what I did is I put this side back on there, and I super glued the hell out of it, making sure that this contact was in its proper spot. It's this one right here, and you'll see how it connects to the back here, and it comes out, and this other little contact will come up, and it'll make contact with that one there. So you'll be able to see it once you get it. You'll see. Watch. See how that comes up there? Line those two contacts up and super glue the hell out of this busted out piece, and that might be your problem. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a little sandpaper and just clean the contacts out where they were burned, so that they won't have a insulation in there with that burning. So let me get to doing that. Do not get anything on these contacts, and that includes this one here. There's a couple of contacts. Make sure you don't get any glue or anything. If you do, you're going to have to clean those out, and make sure that they're moving. You know, make sure that these things move back and forth, and you didn't freeze them into any kind of permanent position. So these things have to move freely up and down, and see how that one moves, and then this one moves too. So Okay, and the way this goes back together is this plate goes underneath this little brass bushing like that, and you want to, there's a little square here that you want to line that up with, and then down here on the bottom, make sure that little pin, that little plastic pin is in that hole. Okay, and then there's that little white, there's a little white arm here, and that has to fit. Make sure it goes behind the housing, not in front of it. Okay, and line it up. Line it up with your screw hole, and finish putting your Phillips in there, and go ahead and make sure that it's lined up well and that it's not tweaked in there, right? Put that whole unit back on there. Okay? Now, whether or not that's the problem, we're going to have to find out. Now, I mean, the thing is, there's only one way to find out if that was the problem, is put everything back together. So, I think that was the problem. Those contacts were not making contact. It was busted out. So everything else worked. I mean, the washer worked. It agitated, so the motor wasn't burned out. If that didn't agitate and do everything else that it was supposed to do, I would say that was the motor was burned out, especially if you hear it humming and it's not doing anything. Probably burned out, you know, but take this unit off. Take this, it's only one screw, and it's worth looking at, and if that contact is busted out like mine was, glue it back on. Alright, let me get this thing back together. Well, as it turns out, that little junction, that little relay down on my motor, that little contact seemed to do the trick. After I glued that broken part and lined up the points on that thing, the contacts, that seemed to work. Now everything's working fine, so I kind of saved myself a lot of money on you know, not buying a new motor for this. I would have been, I mean, it would have worked because the part came with the motor, so, but I would have never known that it was just that junction box when I really didn't need the whole motor. So I don't know if you can buy those things separate. I kind of doubt it. If you can't repair that, you'll probably have to get the whole motor. I don't know how else you could do it. But first thing I would do, if it's not spinning, or if everything seems to work, but it's not spinning or draining your, you know, going into your rinse, check out that little safety switch on that, because it won't spin if that switch is broken. So be careful, make sure everything's unplugged. You're going to probably be standing on water and stuff, so if you don't feel comfortable doing it, I'd call in a specialist. Just make sure everything is unplugged. Don't work on these things with any kind of electricity, because it's gonna shock you. So don't do it. So again, this is just an informative thing. You know, I don't recommend anybody doing it. You know, if you're not comfortable with doing it, call in a specialist. Thanks for watching, and come back to OG's Garage.